Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Allison and I will be your host for today's festivities as we talk about, well, Canadians' opinion on the Trump's tariffs. Now, I know this is a really controversial topic with a lot of very, very high emotions. So I'm going to try to keep my analysis pragmatic and keep it to just the facts. I will talk about my particular emotional, my emotions, just in the context, to give it context and maybe just reveal if I have any biases, etc. But I'm going to try to keep it pragmatic. I'm going to try to keep it to just explaining the facts on the ground for the most part. And I apologize if it's a little bit halting. This is actually pretty stressful, the situation overall. I guess that's an emotion. I've already started, but and of course I also have issues with social anxiety. So I'm going to try to keep this as on point as possible, try to avoid my usual digressions, but please, be kind. I got into a large argument with someone a few days ago about my pronunciations. Believe me, I don't intentionally mispronounce words. It's usually just a combination of dyslexia and nerves. So keep that in mind. Anyway, with that out of the way, I will do my best to try to give you something that's worth thinking about. And yeah, let's go. So, as everybody knows, there is now a trade war between Canada and the US. And I want to talk about some analysis that I looked into myself to see why that might have happened. But first, I'll give you guys a bit of an update on what's going on in Canada at the moment. We do have an election called. Now, a while back, I think a bunch of Americans were a little bit concerned about the fact that we so-called elected another liberal candidate. We didn't actually elect them. The way that our system works is that the party in power appoints the prime minister. So nobody went to the polls. Nobody elected Carney. He just got in by virtue of his party electing him as prime minister. So now Carney has called an election, and that election will occur April 26th. Unlike your system, we don't have set dates. So the incumbent party in power can call an election whenever it suits them, whenever they think that they will get the best benefit from the timing of the election. And the Liberal Party has definitely done that. And the reason why I say that is because the tariffs have, last year in December, everybody was saying when Pierre Poilievre becomes the next prime minister, because there was such a gap between the Conservatives, which Pierre Poilievre is the leading Conservative candidate for Prime Minister of Canada. And there was such a huge gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals at that time that everybody figured that he was a shoo-in for being the next Prime Minister. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to try to fix my audio on the fly here. But as a result of the tariffs, the significant lead that the Conservatives had over the Liberals has essentially disappeared. And now the outcome of the election, April 26th, is much more up in the air. There's still some people who have hope, but it's likely that we will have another Liberal government in power. And again, it's mostly because of this us versus them rhetoric that's come out of the trade war. And I'm just reporting it as it is. I'm not actually making an opinion on that. And I'm going to see if I can switch back to my better microphone. And nope, doesn't seem to want to work. Let me just figure things out here. And yeah, so it's a bit of touch and go, unfortunately, for us up in the north. And there's a lot of people who are upset over that and deeply concerned about the future of their country because of it. Lot of division. In fact, a couple days ago when we went to a nearby city to actually do some grocery shopping, apologies about this. I think this was a cat-induced sound failure. So I'll be right back. Oh, I think my oh God, good Lord, everything's going to hell right now. I think that I'm gonna have to quit and come back. So just a second, guys. This is I'm really sorry about this.
In the meantime, guys, just so you know, I am in the back room here. I guess Allison will be right back, and you guys can. Oh, I think
I'm
she's
back.
back. Okay,
I'm
I'm gonna
sorry
mute
about that.
myself now. That's okay. Just share the website again so that I can put it
All
up
right,
on the
yes,
screen.
definitely. Sorry about
Yep.
that, guys. It just is there we go.
All
There
right.
we
Yeah,
go.
we're back. Okay.
We're back. All right. So let me continue dealing with that particular problem. So anyway, we're really concerned about many of us are really concerned about having a liberal back-in government and in particular as a result of this sort of conflict between the US and Canada. It's really given them a shot in the arm. It's why Danielle Smith, who is the premier of Alberta, I don't know if you guys know that, premier of Alberta, to give you like situate Alberta in your mind, it's like the Texas of Canada. So it's a very conservative state or a very conservative province. Maybe not as conservative as the most conservative American provinces, but it's pretty high up there. And the premier of Alberta has a lot more sympathy with the American position than perhaps the rest of Canada. Our own premier in Saskatchewan, Scott Moe is also a fairly conservative guy, and he aligns a lot closer to Alberta. So if we're talking about like a 51st state situation and you're not taking all of Canada, which I would seriously not advise, it would probably be Alberta and Saskatchewan as a package deal. Possibly also BC and Manitoba, but BC is very, very liberal and Manitoba is sort of a switch situation. So, I mean, that's the kind of political landscape. Danielle Smith was concerned about this. I think she said to somebody, maybe a Trump aide, that maybe lay off the tariffs until we're done with the election. And I think one reason why this may not have happened is in one of his statements, Trump said that he would rather negotiate with a liberal government than a conservative government. And the reason why is because the liberal government in power, and this is one of the reasons why the East is so upset the West is so upset over the situation in the East. Oh, I should also mention, guys, nobody in the West has a say over who ends up as prime minister. We just don't. We don't have a say federally. I mean, it seems like we might, but we don't. Because of the way the system is set up, it's always the East that basically decides everything on the federal level. So us in the West are pretty much disenfranchised from having that kind of a political say. And but on the other hand, which is really interesting, and I'll show this to you. Let's see, where is it? Now I'm juggling all my tabs. Okay, so just take a look at this. I'm gonna ask Brian. So is this a series of bars that's shown up? Can you see that?
Yes, that's what's
Okay.
showing. Yes, the Alberta
All right.
is not
Net
net
contribution
contribution
to
to
Ottawa.
Ottawa. Yeah.
All right. So I want you to fix this in your mind. The West has no say federally, but we are their piggy bank because of the resources that we create. So there's a lot of animosity in the West as a result of that. Ottawa basically is just, we're just basically a colonial possession of Ottawa in a lot of ways. And again, that creates a lot of resentment. So that's where a lot of the conversation about, Alberta and Saskatchewan becoming a 51st state is coming from. And I mean, and there is a lot of argument over that in Canada as well. It's, like I said, a very contentious issue everywhere. Not just in the US. And so again, the West is subsidizing the East. And what the East is doing is they're taking this oil revenue or this non-renewables revenue, at least they call it non-renewables, and they're using it to virtue signal about climate change priorities. So it's a little bit of a hypocrisy going on there. And then they also are creating Ottawa is also creating a lot of difficulty in the West in developing their resources. They're a big reason why, if you remember a while back, all of these pipelines that were proposed were ended. Like the projects were ended with massive layoffs. And so there's this constant sense of sort of resentment because in simultaneously with taking our resources to fund their state, they are not allowing us to manage those resources in a way that makes us economically, more of a powerhouse. And so again, lots of resentment. That's where that 51st state conversation is coming from. And there are a lot of people in the West right now, and I can hear the rest of Canada sharpening my knives for even saying this. There are a lot of people in the West who think they would get a better deal in the US. They think they would at least get a government that would properly manage their resources, properly focus on economic development. And not just that, this is my own personal favorite, we would get the protections of a constitution. Canada has a constitution, but our constitution works more as a suggestion, like a mild, could you please kind of thing. It's not actually really that binding in law. And I know the US has had some issues with things going on politically, but constitutional violations, but at least you have it. And I know one of the conversations that I've seen coming out of this potential West secession, guys, actually, you know what? I'm going to go to the chat for a moment. Have I explained this sufficiently for you to understand the kind of problems that are going on in Canada? And just tell me if you feel like I need to do a little bit more in terms of explanation, or if you feel like it's good to go. But I'll continue on. If there's any questions, just put them in the chat and I will address them. I see that someone did a super chat, so I probably should deal with that too. It disappeared. Do you have it, Brian? Because it's disappeared. Oh no. Have you considered a libertarian government? Senior Sticks. Are you talking about an extreme far right fascist government? Of course, Canada is not going to do that. Are you crazy? Oh, okay. Let me see. Let's see. What do you guys have to say? All right. Go ask Bavarians how they feel about financing Germany. I'd have to look into that to find out more about it. But anyway, if you, someone says I think we have enough left wingers here. Yeah. Don't take East. Don't take the East. And honestly, I thought about this really, really hard. And, and I didn't start with more of a pragmatic opinion on the whole thing. I was actually really deeply upset about it. I don't enjoy the thought that the country I felt I used to belong to. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's happened to get me to this point. I don't want it to lose its sovereignty, right? I don't want Canada to be broken apart and disappear as a country. That's not something that makes me happy to ponder. But on the other hand, I've gone through a lot of stuff that made me realize that there are some serious problems with what Canada is doing and how it's conducting itself. And my own experience going through the legal system, having a judge just decide that the protections in law for consumers, they're just a suggestion. I can just I can throw out the law and substitute my own opinion. And that I went through that process. And then the whole process of what happened with COOF and all of the restrictions, which were, I think, even worse in Canada than the worst states. And then also what happened with the trucker protests and watching peaceful protesters get their assets seized, get trampled by unmarked enforcers. And then the lawfare being done against one of the people who was an organizer, whose name escapes me at the moment, which it really shouldn't, because she's definitely been sort of a hero of mine. But all of that stuff has made me realize that there's something wrong with our country. And I can't at this point maintain that kind of pain that I was feeling over the loss of Canadian sovereignty. First of all, if that occurs as a result of the tariffs, it's going to be because the Liberal government's mismanagement of the resources that they've been granted, of the federal government's mismanagement of the West, the blocking of the Trans Canada pipeline, which would have given us a significantly better economic bargaining position, the blocking of the East-West pipeline, which would mean that our oil doesn't actually run through the states, the blocking of, I think it was the Pacific pipeline, which would have brought Alberta oil to a deep sea port, and then from there could have gone to all kinds of customers around the world. There was a point in time where Germany wanted to have our resources as a result of the issue of I don't want to say certain words because it's YouTube, but the conflict in Eastern Europe, and Germany wanted to buy our oil. That was destroyed by the administration, by Trudeau. And this mismanagement has put Canada in a position that it can't effectively fight back economically against tariffs. Not that we really could, because we're like 1/10. So this is an inevitability, like, folks. This is an absolute inevitability. But it didn't help that the Liberal government over the last 10 years and their mismanagement of Canadian resources has meant that we're facing this crisis, economically the weakest we've really ever been. And because let me give you an example. In the 50s, Canada had 60 oil refineries. Now it has 20 because of the climate change agenda, in part. So there's been this massive mismanagement of the resources, the economic resources of Canada, even though Ottawa still uses them to fund all of its virtue signaling. It's crazy. And then there's this mismanagement, and we can't now that the crisis is upon us, and the Liberal government is suddenly realizing, oh, hey, we need to have a diversified client base in order to oppose these tariffs. We need to be 100% about making a good product that Canada can give the world in order to oppose this kind of pressure that the U.S. is putting on us. At this point in time, it's too late. The mismanagement has done its damage. We can't actually we can't build this stuff up in the moment of crisis. We needed to be building this stuff up, 10 years ago. We needed to be doing it when all of these projects were in their height and before they were opposed and destroyed by the Liberal government. And now we're reaping we're sowing the harvest. We're reaping the harvest of our mismanagement over the last however many decades, right? So, I mean, like I said, it's an inevitability. And again, like this is not something I say with relish, but, I mean, I've seen people say, well, you wouldn't want to be part of the US if it was Biden who was president. I'm like, yes, actually, that would be okay. And the reason why it would be okay is even when Biden was president, you still had a constitution. Okay, you still had your culture of entrepreneurship and freedom of speech, and fighting for your rights. You still had that. Oh goodness, did I just lose my video again? Oh no, wait, no,
No, you're fine.
Okay. So, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, a Democratic president, that's fine. A Democratic president is basically a conservative prime minister for us. So no, I mean, bring it on. Anyway, but that was another argument. People are saying, oh, and I'm not even a conservative, right? I'm more of a classical liberal, but at the same time, I can recognize reality. If you are going to destroy your economy, when a crisis like this trade war happens, you're not going to have an economy to fall back on. So the Liberal policies are creating the destruction of Canadian sovereignty. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter what I think about it. What matters is what has been done. And I know a lot of people there's some question on why Trump is doing this. And I wanted to get into talking a bit about that. I'm going to look and see if we have any super chats. Actually, you know what? I should do the things. Yeah, I should do the things. That's what I should do. All right. So if you're listening to me and you're enjoying this content and this particular analysis, you can support the show at feedthebadger.com/support. And if you want to send me a message, the very best way to send us a message is at feedthebadger.com/justthetip, because we get the full benefit of whatever tip you send, and you get the benefit of sending your comment with a little bit more space to analyze your thoughts, and you get the benefit of sending your comment not through YouTube's comment thresher system. We'll call it that. All right, so I'm going to see if we have anything. Take some deep breaths, calm my overheated mind. Maybe tell my overheated puppy that he's not going to be getting. I'm working. No, not going to be getting any frisbee. I shouldn't have used the F word. Okay, let's see. All right, so this is the vertical chat, which is okay. This is going to be fun. The vertical chat is always fun. The OBD network says false. You have it backwards. I don't know if that's in reference to me. So just give me a heads up if you are still there and tell me if it's reference to me. Oh, somebody's asking me about my glasses. I get migraines, so I try to filter out blue light. Although, interestingly enough, it's red light that really aggravates my head. But and I also need the other glasses so that I can see a damn thing. So that's what the two glasses are for. Doesn't seem to be anything else. Can you guys send like complete thoughts? All right, Ruben the Imitator says, "Oh, Allison, if you were to stay in Saskatchewan when it and Alberta were to cede from the Ottawatian federal government, then you and your fellow Saskatchewanites wouldn't lose your sovereignty. You would gain sovereignty." Well, that depends. Like, the U.S. might not give us the right to vote federally. It might be a good idea not to. At least until the cities sort of empty out, and whoever wants to remain in Kazakhstan goes east. But yeah, so who knows? Who knows? Like I said, this is not something that I'm saying with great relish. It's just a reality that I'm recognizing. Like we screwed the pooch. If we wanted to compete effectively in a trade war, we had to be setting up the economic ability to do so decades ago instead of sacrificing it for climate change virtue signaling. And it is virtue signaling. Even if you think that climate change is a virtue, the problem is that if you sacrifice the economies of the countries that are actually interested in maintaining the environment, and in the future, you're going to be handing the earth over to the countries that don't care, right? That will sacrifice the environment for the country or for the economy. So it's like it's a very tricky problem. It's something that needs a lot more thought than this kind of blunt force solutions. And for example, the carbon tax, which really infuriates me because, of course, climate activism and environmental activism would end up, the solution to it, supposed solution, would end up being a government tax. Like who? Yeah, right. Anyway, so I mean, it's more like an inevitability, and I hope that whatever happens, that we are able to perhaps increase our civil rights, and I'm actually thinking that we would, even under a Democratic president, simply because of the Constitution. Simple as that. So that would be a big improvement for the people currently in these provinces, I think. I don't think that a lot of them would agree. In fact, like I said, this weekend, I went to a grocery store to buy groceries. Surprise, what a twist. And there was an older woman who was talking about how all the produce was American. And of course it's American because you guys have a growing season that lasts longer than ours. And in some places, you've already started growing, even though it's March. Like I think in Texas and those areas, there might be 2 growing seasons. So, of course, the produce are coming from the States. But here's the other thing. And she was upset because of that. Well, I mean, without it, you're not going to have any produce at this point in time. Like Canada can't supply cucumbers in the middle of March, right? And I'm not sure I would want to necessarily eat cucumbers from Mexico. I'm sure we do anyway, but sorry, I'm throwing shade on the Mexicans. All right, but I was looking at this and I was thinking, all of the American farmers who are producing this produce, they didn't ask for this, and the truth is, you don't. When you like, let's just say that Saskatchewan and Alberta merge with the US. The country isn't their president. The country is their people, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with Americans. Absolutely nothing wrong, right? And I'm saying this to the liberals. There's even nothing wrong with Americans who voted for Trump, right? There's nothing wrong with Americans. You guys are great. You're very friendly. My experience is that you're very polite. I went down to Texas, and for some reason in Texas, if you're Canadian, they like to give you stuff. At least 10, 15 years ago when we went. No, actually, I think it was 18. We would go into the mall and they'd say, "Oh, your accent," and we'd say, "Well, we're Canadian," and they'd be like, "Oh, here, have a Cinnabon," for being Canadian. It was, very, very nice, very hospitable people. So when you join like this, you're not necessarily joining with the federal government. You're joining with the people. There's nothing wrong with Americans. I'm not going to freak out because, suddenly Americans are our brother citizens. It's no point, right? But anyway, I wanted to get into a more like an analysis of why this might be happening. But maybe this has gone too long. Brian, how is your time?
Well, our show is at 4, so I mean, and yeah, I think we can go for a while longer if you want to get into something else. Maybe another 20 minutes, the most.
Yeah, sure. Let's we'll just make sure to 20, 30 minutes or just 20 minutes?
30 minutes is fine.
Okay, all right.
All right. Okay.
So I would like to get into a bit more why this is happening now. And this is more on the American politics side. So this is where I might make some enemies because I'm making these conjectures from, position of being a Canadian. You snow N words. What position do you have? But, I figured I'd offer my analysis, and for your edification, perhaps it will be edifying. Perhaps you'll just be angry, but something to think about. Somebody says, but what about my Twiglet supply? Your Twiglet supply. I don't think Twiglets come from the US. I don't think, and this is one of the things that I think, I'm okay with joining with the US because I don't think Twiglets have ever found a foothold in the US market. And I think that speaks to the fact that they aren't demonic, that Americans are not demonic. What that says about people in the UK, I'll leave up to the imagination. All right. Okay. Senior Sticks 2. Second idea from New Canada. Canada with guns, casinos, etc. Well, we already have guns and casinos. Except if we end up being part of the US, that means we probably are going to keep our guns because they keep trying to take them away. The Liberal government keeps restricting them in very, very bizarre ways. And in fact, at one point I heard that they're taking away guns from the Canadian people to give to Ukrainians, except the Ukrainians don't want them because they're not infantry weapons. They are, in fact, hunters' rifles and shotguns and stuff, and they're not really useful in a war. Surprise, surprise. Okay. All right, so let's get into a bit of the part that might get people upset. All right, so why is this happening? Because this is a lot of crazy stuff. I don't know if you've noticed. Like I've felt like the last 3 months, 4 months, I felt like the world has become a new level of absolute crazy. So I don't know if you guys agree. And I'm going to look at why now. Why has this felt this way? And here we go. Just to check, it's when does federal debt reach unsustainable levels? Do you see that, Brian? Oh, wait, Brian might have walked away
Yes.
from
No,
Okay,
I'm
good.
here. I see
Okay,
it.
all right. I just want to confirm so that we can take a look at it. Now, when I go through this, this is looking at the situation with the U.S. I'm not looking at this in any kind of triumphalism. I'm not looking at this with judgment because, let's face it, this system has greatly benefited the world in a lot of ways. Maybe it could have benefited it in different ways. Maybe it could have been structured in a way that rose everybody up. But to a degree, especially Europe and Canada, and I guess to a degree Mexico, have benefited from the system as it is. Maybe the rest of the world not so much, but we've benefited. So what we're looking at is how to begin this. We're looking at the end of a world order, right? And the reason why I started to think about this was because how did Trump get in office? Now, I know he got the popular vote and also, the electoral college vote. But as we saw, if we allow from 2020, I don't know if I can say this, I'll have to be very careful. Assuming that the 2020 election was chosen by parties other than the voters, they could do it again. So how did he get in? If they can, I reject your reality and substitute my own for the electoral system in the US once, I'm sure they can do it again. And what I'm thinking, and this has nothing to do on Trump's intentions because I don't know, I cannot tell you. And I'm not trying to say that he's part of the deep state system. I'm saying that there are times when an establishment invites an outsider in, and those times usually are when everything is going to shit. And I'll call this the man on a horse principle because it's something that you saw in Renaissance Italy, all of the city states, Florence, Milan, everyone. If their establishment in those cities got themselves into an enormous mess, they would invite a stranger on a horse to come in, throw executive powers at him and say, fix it. Right. So I think what's happened in a lot of ways is that the federal government, what you might call the deep state, is in a pickle. And they are in some ways allowing an outsider in as a Hail Mary to try to fix the situation. Now, who have I offended? Go ahead and tell me in the comments. Let's see if there's anybody screaming at me for what I've just said. All right. Nobody. So I'll continue. And the crisis that I see that's happening, right? Okay. This was a report published October 6th, 2023. When does the federal debt reach unsustainable levels? And I'm going to give you a brief summary. Essentially, this report, and I think Brian put it in the low bar, gives the U.S. government 20 years. And that is very, very optimistic. And it relies on a couple factors. And one of those factors is that the market for U.S. debt believes that eventually the U.S. will contract, like it will engage in fiscal policy that reduces the debt. So increasing taxes, decreasing spending. So in other words, to even get 20 years, there has to be a period of austerity in the US government where they are firing bureaucrats. They're taking people off the payroll. They're considering a VAT what they would call a well-executed VAT, which wouldn't necessarily impact the marketplace too much. But so they're considering like fiscal measures to reduce the debt load. And that's the market for US debt has to believe that that's going to happen. And I think that maybe that's what we're seeing to a degree, but I think there's some novel stuff going on as well, because not only are we seeing a contraction in government spending with the Doge and the US aid when it comes to the American government, we're also seeing this introduction of tariffs, which I think would also increase the potential tax income of the US government. But there's another thing that I think is going on, right? And I think it's the clue comes in how Trump has described the Canadian government or the Canadian economy. I don't want to say stealing, but ripping off the US. And so let me get into that. Now, he has basically looked at the trade deficit with Canada, which is about 200 billion, supposedly. And he's referred to it as Canada ripping off the US. Now, let me explain where that deficit actually comes from. The US purchases crude oil. I believe it's crude. Don't quote me on that. They purchase it from Canada at 30% below market rate for that particular grade of oil. The US then refines it and sells it at market value. So even though they are paying 200 billion, I'm sure it's not precisely 200 billion, but we'll go with that, 200 billion to get the crude, they're actually overall, Americans are actually overall making substantially more from it. So to frame this as Canadians sort of ripping off Americans is a little bit disingenuous unless you look at it in terms of GDP, that's gross domestic product, which is an essential component of the US's credit worthiness in the rest of the world. Let me take a moment to mention credit worthiness and explain. The US can sell its debt at a substantially lower interest rate than any other country in the world. And it's in part because of its commitments in NATO and the fact that it's the reserve currency and the fact that its economy is gigantic. And that's represents with the GDP. So when Trump talks about Canada taking a bite, I think what he's saying is that 200 billion is subtracted from the GDP of the US, leading to a lowering of credit worthiness. So what this really is about is sort of balancing the budget, right? And in that context, in order to make sure that this system continues to work, and again, they're giving a 20-year optimistic measure. A lot of people think realistically 5 to 10. So the US is at the precipice of this financial crisis, and it's huge, right? But if it can show lenders that it's willing to contract its obligations and increase its income, then it can continue on for the 20 years at the current rate of spending or similar to the current rate of spending. So my thoughts are that the 51st state rhetoric is actually genuine. And the reason why, and it also is in conjunction because I'm thinking about how Trump is looking at Greenland, thinking about annexing Greenland. And again, when we're talking about the end of a global system, we're talking all gloves come off. Like, this is going to be a fight to the death at some point because all wars start with resources. And so when he's talking about annexing Greenland, annexing Canada, getting the Panama Canal back, I think this is maybe not genuine. Maybe not just a joke or trolling. And I recognize he's a very funny man and he has some wonderful trolls, but this could be genuine. And he's floating the idea to get people to think about it because he wants it there. And once it's there, it starts to exert its own gravity. And the reason why I say that is let's just spitball here. If the US annexed Western Canada, right? Western Canada has the primary amount of resources of Canada, and Canada's said to have about 30 trillion in terms of resources. And recently, Alberta has discovered even more proven resources when it comes to natural gas. And they're looking into the oil sands as well. So we're looking at an acquisition of probably 30 billion or 30 trillion in terms, and also, of course, this region has been mismanaged in terms of developing its resources. So they're not just inheriting 30 billion, they're 30 trillion. They're also inheriting a, in some ways, completely undeveloped resource base. Now, imagine adding that to the GDP of the US. And then there's Greenland, which is a very much similar situation. So I think that's why he's been sort of floating this. And again, if we're looking at the end of the empire, all gloves come off, right? And establishment that has been riding high on its own bullshit starts to realize, oh, hey, the bills have come due. We need a guy on a horse to come clean up our mess. So, I mean, I'm just floating that. And then there's something else that's really interesting that has to do with AI and the mechanization of the workforce. But I think we're close to the end of time. So, yeah, like I said, they would, even if I were, let me put it this way. I don't believe that the elite in the deep state, Washington, D.C., puts anything before its paycheck. And I mean the elite, not just the bureaucrats on the ground. I don't think it puts anything before its paycheck. So if they can bring out an outsider who has the tenacity and the ruthlessness to maintain the system that they benefit from, I think they'll do it. And again, if we're looking at the end of a global empire, then all bets are off. And honestly, it may, in my opinion on the issue, may not be relevant at all. Well, it isn't. I'm just a Canadian serf in the one of the colonial possessions of Ottawa. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking might be happening. So I'll put that out there. See if you guys are see if you got chew it over. Think about it. People, when empires start to crumble, and I'm not saying that, and that there's really nothing to take the US's place at this point. But yeah, that's all bets are off. Okay. All right. So I'm going to call it a day. And yeah, if you have anything you'd like to message, actually, I got to make sure that we don't have any. Nope, no super chows. If you would like to send a super chow or tip in a message, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And yeah, and if you would like to support the show, feedthebadger.com/support. Hopefully I didn't tread on too many feet. Yes, I am a woman. I may not look like one, but I am. So once again, thank you for your kind attention. And Brian, do you want to take us out, or did you have any thoughts?
No.
Have I stepped on too many toes?
No, I think
All
it's all fair stuff to speculate on. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah. And honestly, like my personal emotional thing is I don't want my country to lose its sovereignty, but I recognize that mismanagement has been compiling to such a level that maybe it would be better that these resources go to extending the American empire. And because at least the American people have an entrepreneurial spirit and they can use them to fix the overall problem, which fundamentally the overall problem is a loss of purpose and a loss of something to do, really. All right, so I'm going to call it. Thank you all for your kind attention. I hope you found this edifying. I hope you think it maybe makes the rustles the jimmies, gets the jimmies moving, gets those jimmies juiced. So something to think about, something to consider. And thank you again for your kind attention, and hope to see you next time.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. holy shit, you're fucked.